So I will go through a lot tonight, like a lot. And I created this 18-page document to guide me through the whole thing, because it's too much to remember, right? So in this demonstration, I'm gonna create an application, a web application from scratch. I'm gonna pull it into Git, and then to Circle, and then to Google. So I'm just gonna use this document as my guide, and so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new Git repo. For this demonstration, I decided to use Bitbucket just for fun. So I'm gonna call it demo 3. It's my third demo. All right, so here's my Git repo. It gives me a command which I can run to clone it here. All right, so I have a demo 3 directory here, which is completely empty. My documents. All right, so to start off a project in Django, I have compiled a bunch of commands I can just run. It will take some time to install all the software needed. This is all boilerplate code. Do you know how?
Yeah, this is lots.
All right. So I've run all these commands which has set up a clean Django installation. So Django is a framework in Python, and it has a command line interface that we can run now. I'm going to show you. So it gives me an overview of all the commands I can do for this this interface. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to start projects. Okay, that's done. So it created a bunch of files for me, which is fine. And now I can actually already run the server to see what it's doing. And if I go to browser now, I can browse to my local host. And here you get your out-of-the-box Django website that I just created. All right, moving on. All right, so I'm gonna open up my project here in this IDE. So this IDE is called PyCharm, which is a free program, a free application. You can just download it as a community edition, and it's an awesome IDE for working with Python. So I'm going to, this is all just generated code that I just got for free, right? So a Django project always has a settings file. And what I'm going to do here is insert a little statement.
Yeah, if there's anything you can do to make it larger on screen for us, that would help.
Right. See if I can zoom this to. Oh, okay.
Oh. You are thinking of using PyCharm.
So what I've done here is I've created or injected this little line which allows us to read environment variables from an environment file. Because you want to, when you run your project, you want to inject certain like API keys and stuff into your runtime without actually embedding them in your code, right? That's bad practice, as everybody knows. So this little line here loads everything from a file into the environment, and those things will be later then used as settings. And I'm going to take these three hosts as my allowed host, because Django, when it runs, it always checks if the domain you're browsing the thing on is in the allowed host, and if not, you get a 500 error. All right, so that's it for the Django so far. Now I'm going to move on to database. For some reason, Python and Django works well with Postgres. So I'm going to head over to my Postgres thingy. Ooh, that's stuff you can't see. And create a demo3 database. All right. And then going back to my settings, there's this database thingy. So I'm going to configure Django to connect to this new database I just created, which I called demo3. Okay, so another thing that Django has is migrations. So I guess everybody knows what migrations are. So now that I've done my configuration, I can actually run the migrations that I got already for some basic stuff. There. Now, going back to my database, you can see that it actually got a bunch of tables in here. Right. So I'm going to populate the database with a new user. And then I will be able to revisit my site and go to /admin. So this is all free stuff you get out of the box when installing Django. It comes with an administration panel. And so far, there aren't much tables, but we can already go and create users if we want to. But this is extendable, and whatever model you create in your project, you can plug into this administration panel. And we use this a lot. Right. All right, so let's push everything we have so far into Git. And to prove that it works. There's your master branch, and there are all files. Great. All right. So the next step is Circle. So I'm going to head over to CircleCI. So CircleCI I've set up already and connected it to my Bitbucket account. So Circle now is able to look into my Bitbucket and see that I created a new repo, and here I can connect that repo to Circle by clicking Setup Project. I tell Circle that's a Python project, and it provides a sample configuration file. So I'm just going to go and copy this thing, go back to my IDE. Now I have to exit because I have to do some things here. Oh, that's the wrong project. So Circle wants us to create a specific file in a specific directory, which is called CircleCI. It's the directory name. And within that directory, I have to create a new file called config.
Is it possible to change the resolution of this so it's bigger?
I will switch to presentation mode after I'm done doing this. So here. There. So I pasted the configuration that I got from Circle in here and do nothing with it. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna make some minor changes. First of all, here's where you define what jobs you want Circle to run, and they by default call it the build job. I think a better name would be a test job. And then here you specify what Docker image Circle uses to do the testing and building and all that. And by default, it uses this specific Docker file, which is pre-built and hosted by Circle, so we don't have to mess with Docker or anything. But they have a whole bunch of different images, and I'm going to use this specific Python image, which also has browsers built in, so we can actually run some Selenium tests. And we're going to extend that with a Postgres database in the Docker, all in Circle. I can make this a bit bigger too. All right, so out of the box, this configuration file comes with one job, which is the test job, but I'm also going to add a deploy job, and I've prepared this already at home, so we don't have to worry about all the details, but just to quickly go over it, when Circle executes this deploy job, it starts with this specific image, it does a checkout from Git. Then I've created this prepare task to do various things like configuring the Google application and putting the database connection settings into an environment variable, and installing the all the packages and Django itself. Then I'm going to, this is all during deploy, right? So I'm going to migrate my migrations to Google using a Google provided binary called Cloud SQL Proxy. So it's a bit complicated, but you know what this thing does is just migrates everything into the cloud database. Then I have to download and install a Google SDK for actually deploying my code. So that's all in here. And finally, I will deploy my code with these 4 commands. There's a lot of detail there, and not enough time tonight to go over all the details, but I will make this all public so you can look at it later if you want to. Finally, we define the workflows. So in Circle, you want to execute certain jobs depending on your Git branch. If you're doing something in master or develop, no, this is the ignore. So if you're just working on a feature branch, you just want to do the test job, right? You don't want to deploy because you're just developing something. So in a test job, which is ignored by the branches called master and develop, you will just do the test. And we have the deploy workflow, which is only on develop and master. We will also do the tests, but then also run the deploy job. So that's basically what's all in here. Right. So I'm going to push all that to Git. And if I go to Circle now, and I start building, it failed. I don't know why. Maybe it's already building. Let's see. I don't know why. Maybe I did something wrong in this file, so I'm just gonna grab it from my previous demo, pasted it. Oh, not the file name. All right, let's see what Circle says about this. Success. All right. Now going to my jobs, you will see that the first job is running, which is a test job. So you can monitor what Circle is actually doing here. But you know, it takes a few minutes to run through all those scripts. But in the end, it will just run the unit tests. And we didn't make any unit tests yet, so of course it will pass. So let's move on. All right, so now we're going to create a sample application in Django. And I just used the inspiration from the standard tutorial on the Django website. Simplified it a bit because we're not doing the whole Django course today, but so I'm going to start with this command that says start app and then an app name. I will call it Pulse. All right, so after I've done that, I don't know how do I how can I see the files in person? Sorry?
Command 1.
Command 1?
Toggle back and forth.
Oh yeah. So with that simple command, I got a new directory here with a bunch of files all created for me and a migration directory. And the files are all empty. So to tell Django that it should actually load that new app, I have to go back to my settings, and there is a installed apps array here. So I'm just gonna paste Pulse in there because I did create it. And I'm also using the Bootstrap 4 app, which is one of the requirements I actually put in requirements.txt. So here's your Bootstrap. So it gives you some files like jQuery and Bootstrap, CSS, and all that stuff. So we don't have to download and hook it up. It's all done for us just by doing this. All right, so let's create a simple view. So I'm going to my views, and I'm going to paste this code in here. I'm just going to create a poll view class, and let's not do anything in it. Just see what happens. And in the URLs of the app, which is a file that doesn't exist yet, so I'm just going to create it. urls.py. I'm going to specify my router. So I'm going to say that the empty path will point to my new poll view, and I call that router entry, I call it index. All right. And I also have to go to my general project URLs file and include that actual URLs file that I just created into this general router entry point. Okay, so that's all saved. And the nice thing about the Django run server command is that it picks up any changes. So whenever you make a change to any source file, it will just restart the server automatically. So that's what you see here. It restarted the server. So I don't have to do anything. I just can go to my page again. I will load, and as expected, we will get a 405 error, which means method not allowed. And that is because we did not define any methods that should be linked to a HTTP method. So we did not create a get method in our view, and therefore we get a 405. All right, so for our little whole app, I'm going to define some models here. So we've got a question model with a question string field. We've got a choice that we connect to a question as a foreign key with a label. And we're going to make a response model. So, and also a response table to record any answers that people gave on our poll. So save that. And then I will create the migrations and migrate it So at this point, Django picked up this model, created the database tables, and it's ready to use. Now, as any platform, also Django has a way to inject data into your tables through a fixture. So I'm creating a fixtures directory, and I'm going to create a new file in there, which I call polls.yaml, and paste my fixture data in there. And then I can, in my command line, I can say load data polls. So now I got my data pre-populated in my database. All right, so here we can go to admin.py and register our 3 new models into the admin section. So we can actually go into the admin after this and administer our poll data. So just to prove that it works, going to admin. And here we've got our new 3 tables. So here I could just go in and say question 3, save, and there's your 3rd question. Okay, so for the presentation layer, Django works with templates. So I'm creating a new directory again, calling it templates. And I'm going to create a base.html template. Paste the HTML in there. So, you know, we've all seen the syntax before. It looks a bit like, yeah, it reminds me a bit of what I did with Shopify. They call it Liquid, I believe. Similar idea. And so this is my base. And I'm going to create a new file called index. So this is for entry page HTML. So I'm going to say that I'm extending from this base.html, and the content in this case would be a list of questions. And finally, we have a template for showing an actual poll question. So that's called detail. So there's our detail HTML. Now here I have a bunch of Python code that actually defines the view as a whole. So remember this little view, I'm going to replace it with the whole thing I coded before. So we've got a question form class, which extends from a model form, which is a thing Django provided. And in this class, we can define that this form works with the response model. So when I render this form, it will use the fields in response and show those fields in a form. And I'd say that the answer should be a radio select. This is to show radio input buttons. And then for the view itself, I've got two methods. A get method that will look if there's an ID in the request. If there is, we will show the form. So here, show question form. And if there's no ID, we will just show the index with all the questions. So this thing here queries the database, and we're only going to show the last 5 questions with this little statement here. And then for the post method, this is for when you're inside a question, or inside a question, you can give an answer, and we use the same code form again, and we provide it with the data that the user gave. And if the form is valid, we'll save it, and otherwise we will show an error message. And if something goes wrong, we show a 404. All right, and finally in our app, let's do some unit testing and Selenium testing. And there's a placeholder for that. It's called test.py, so I'm just going to paste all that code in here. It's too much to go over all this stuff, but basically just test everything of this little form and view that we just created. All right, so I can actually now right-click this file and say run the tests. So it is now running the tests. Fixture named all found. Okay, so I rename. Okay, try again. Yeah, so everything passes, so all our tests are good. And I even ran the Selenium tests, and it creates screenshots, but it tries to write it in a directory that doesn't exist yet, so it didn't do it. But if I create that directory and run the test again, I'll get a nice screenshot here of the poll page, the questions page, and the detail page. It's all in there, see? And of course, the app is also working in a normal browser. So here have your questions. What's your favorite brewery? My own beer here, of course. Vote. That's it. So this is a little app. It's working. Yeah, so let's push that into Git, and we'll create a feature branch for it. Did it do anything?
It's the actual branch tree.
Okay. So Lee, because you're the Git expert, what's the command?
Okay. -b. I don't know the command off the top of my head. no entity. How do you reset it?
Doesn't matter, I'm just going to push it for now. Get the idea, right? You put it in a feature branch, and then when you're done with the branch, you merge it back into, in this case, master. Just for speed, let's just push it to master directly, and then it will actually, when I go to Circle, see that it is running this test job now. So it's running the same unit test that I just did locally, but now it runs it in a Docker image on CircleCI. And when all the, if all the tests pass, which I expect they will, it will continue with the deploy job and just push everything to Google. So because I didn't set anything up yet in Google, this will fail miserably. It's fine. Because that's the next part, Google. So the main entry point for Google Cloud is this URL. Wrong user. So everything you do in Google Cloud, you do it in a project. So I set up a project already I called demo. And then within your Google Cloud project, you have to enable certain features. In our case, we are deploying to something they call App Engine. And because I've already set it up, you see that's already running, but I've got some links here in this document that I will share, where you can actually find the entry points of how to set up certain elements of your project if you want to do this yourself. So you set up your App Engine, your Cloud SQL, you have to enable some APIs. And then to glue it all together, in your console, you go to credentials, and you say create credentials. And then it will give you a JSON file with a bunch of keys in it. I already did that, so I can show you how that file looks like. So this is a file that Google will give you with that has all the credentials to do like a machine-to-machine integration and deployment and stuff like that. But because Circle is deploying to Google, we have to provide this stuff to Circle. Now, to make that easy, we throw that file into a base 64 encoding. So this whole JSON file is now encoded as a long string that I can actually copy. And then I can go to Circle, and in my configuration, I can set environment variables. So I'm going to add an environment variable here called auth, because I think that's a nice name. And I paste that string in there. And I also have to specify what the database connection is. So I have a database name, which is demo. DB username, which is the default Postgres. DB password. Let's do something simple. What else? Yeah, so also this is the identifier of where our database lives, which you can actually look up if you go to, in Google, go to SQL. I've already created this database because it takes some time to spin up, so again, the wrong user. So here I can actually create my demo database, which is a Postgres database in the cloud. Authorization, users. I already set up my demo user here, so that user is able to now connect to this demo database that I just created. So that's all set up there. Oh yeah, and this is the identifier of the connection string that Google uses to connect to its database. So that has to go into Circle as well. Let's go DB. Yeah, and for the deployment tasks in Circle, we have to specify what the project ID is. Project ID. And it also stores some files on a bucket, which is like a S3, but then for Google. Buckets. And I believe that's it. And then finally, Google, when it's deploying an app, it needs the deployment settings for Google itself has to be in a file which can be any name, but the default is app.yaml, so I'm just going to use that. And it has to live in the project root. So here we have things that we tell Google to do. So the runtime is Python. The environment is, they call Flex. So it means that they will do the scaling and all the fun stuff they will take care of. We don't want to deploy these two directories to Google. We tell Google that to run the server, it has to execute this command. Python version is 3.6. This is our database connection and scaling settings. So we just need one instance, but that's configurable, and that's about it. So we push that again. Just added the app.yaml. And if everything is the way it should be, it should now work. So let's go to our jobs. It's running the test again, of course. So while it's doing its thing, let's see what else do we have in here. Yeah, the only thing left to talk about is basic things that I've not covered in this little tutorial, specifically for Django. We do a lot with, because we also have customers in Quebec, we do a lot with I18N. So everything we do is always translated. And Django has really great features for that. We didn't look at security hardening. So of course, a big important thing is to make sure that everything is safe, secure cookies, all that stuff. Again, Django has great tools for that. Caching, we do, of course, a lot of cache in various stages of applications. Also, well presented in Django. And the way to store passwords and keys and all that so in this case, we used an environment file to put all that stuff in, which is not ideal. And there's other ways, but yeah, we're still not sure what we should do as a company for that, but that's still work in progress. So let's see where Circle is. Oh, I see something green. So okay, so the test passed. I think it's now okay. The deploy job failed on a migrate. Okay, so apparently, while we were trying to migrate our stuff to the database in the cloud, something went wrong. So I've seen this in my previous demo too, and I did not find the answer to it, but I can show you. Yeah, so this was my first demo, or my second, whatever, where I actually did the deploy job successfully, and the output would then look something like this. So it builds its Docker file, pushes it up into the cloud, and finally it gives you a nice URL that you can actually go to and see your app running. You know, I don't want to go and troubleshoot what's going wrong in here because it's just a sample application, right? But that's the idea of how the whole thing comes together. So that's, I think, all that I have to say. Questions?
So is App Engine running the Docker file, or
Yeah.
is it actually extracting and storing the pipeline?
It runs, App Engine runs in Docker, yes.
It does run Docker.
Yeah. It actually, it deploys your application into a Docker file, and that in the instance, it has the application in Docker, and it has a bunch of more Docker files also running in. Yeah, and it runs an nginx server to as a wrapper around your application. Yeah.
So how does IFM compare to, let's say,
I'm sorry,
how does it compare to AWS?
How does it compare to I think it is very comparable. I've not worked with AWS with this material so far. I don't know how they support. I'm sure they support Docker things as well, and I guess you can also use AWS for the same purpose. Yeah. When you start using Google App Engine or the Google Cloud, it gives you, I think, a year of free use. And then afterwards, of course, it's built by how much you're actually using. How much that is, I don't know.
There's a pricing
Yes?
App Engine scales, so say it scales with like multiple instances, right? Does it, I'm assuming it has to like load balance between them. Does it allow you any flexibility in your load balancing method? Can you give some performance? Is it just round robin? Just anything like that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's pretty well abstracted from you as the developer or DevOps person. And there's a whole bunch of settings you can do, but I've not looked into that part of the App Engine.
I think